right, it's time for KP's video news here, and I'm going back. I'm gonna do one more coronavirus story, and then I'm going to kind of split this newscast up here. But this thing here is about misdiagnosis, and if you've been watching lately, you've been noticing that fumbles, the DC dunce Trump has been appearing on TV just about every day here lately. And I was like, why is he on TV so much? Then I thought about it, I said, oh, I see why he's on TV every day now. Because he can't have his little Klan rallies, anymore, because most states have already banned having like large groups of people together. So he can't do his little dunce rallies. So now it's like, okay, he get a chance to get a little free publicity by showing up on TV every day. But if you think about it, hell, he's been on TV every day anyway. But now he's just popping up, and he got 5 or 6 people standing behind him. I don't know what it is that he thinks, because what kind of propaganda that's being thrown out there. But one thing you can rest assured is I'm going to always try to look through the propaganda and the misdiagnosis and all the stupidity that comes out of his mouth, man. I'm going to try to come with the real every time. And this story here is a story about Kevin Harris. It's a 55-year-old black man from Ohio, and he had posted a video on Facebook sharing his experience of battling the coronavirus. He said he wanted to really be sure if he would survive before sharing his story. I had to wait and make sure that I wasn't going to die, so I couldn't be on Facebook and die on Facebook, Harris said on the video. And as he laid in the hospital bed in Mercy Health St. Joseph Warren Hospital, Harris, a father of 4, said it started when he got sick. So he went to the doctor, who diagnosed that he had the flu. Time out. This is like, I don't know how many stories I've read so far about black people being misdiagnosed or being denied the tests. So I'm going to keep an eye on this and try to see if anybody's collecting any numbers here, because this seems like every day I'm running into somebody else that has been either denied the coronavirus test or just told that they got something entirely different. Okay. So he said, doctor told me he had the flu, but he did not recently travel out of the country. He hadn't seen anybody for 2 weeks before he began feeling ill. Eventually, he suffered worse symptoms, including fever, fatigue, and shortness of breath. A friend then drove him to the hospital. This is not your typical flu, Harris said. It's bad. Harris said that he had lost weight, and he got down to 212 pounds, and even dropped to 202 pounds since testing positive for the coronavirus. At one point in the video, he can be heard coughing, in which he said, yeah, that's the cough. Harris urges everyone to get themselves checked if they feel unusual symptoms, though it may differ for each person. He said, I never had a sore throat. I never had any signs until that night, and I started coughing, and that was the first sign, and it went downhill within 24 hours like gangbusters. I woke up several times thinking I was going to die. I'd go to the bathroom, and the trip to the bathroom would take an hour. He said he made the video. Tell people they can get through this if they don't get scared. Although he's not yet completely healed of the disease, he gave credit to the hospital for helping him get better. And God bless you over there, brother. And that's Kevin Harris. It's a man from Ohio, Warren, Ohio. And God bless you, and I hope you recover 100%. And so that's part of that misinformation I'm telling you about. People, he got misdiagnosed, and the doctor told him he had the flu. And all the time he had the coronavirus. So maybe sometimes you might have to get that second opinion. You can't. This is something that you can't really play with. And I'm going on to a different type of story here. And this is like some crazy thing that's going on down in Georgia right now. And then you got a cast of all-white cast of five state lawmakers leading the charge for the next round of mass incarceration. And Atlanta, Georgia, activists in Georgia say a new bill proposed by 5 state lawmakers, which just happen to be all white, will lead to mass incarceration of children as young as 13 years old, known as the Gang Bill, House Bill 994, and it was sponsored by the state representatives Bert Reeves, Barry Fleming, Chuck Estefan, Andy Welch, and Jenny Earhart. The bill, on the heels of Georgia making substantial changes to reform the criminal justice system by the end of former Governor Nathan Deal's final term, the state had created accountability court, reduced mandatory minimum sentences, allowed prosecutors to choose diversion programs, and reduce certain nonviolent felonies to misdemeanor offenses. It currently costs the state $20,000 a year to house an inmate, and the changes kept hundreds of young men and women out of the system. They expand the definition of criminal gang activity to include charges such as felony obstruction or hindering law enforcement officer and burglary with intent to commit a sexual offense. Now this is what they're trying to do. It says, although Georgia is already home to the toughest gang laws in the nation, the 5 lawmakers that's what they're seeking, and they're also seeking to establish criminal gang activity as a criteria for juvenile courts to consider for adult prosecution. So they want to try juveniles as adults, to create multiple counts of criminal gang activity for similar conduct. So that would be if you come in there and you got one incident, they're going to try to make it like you got multiple counts of criminal gang activity for similar conduct, and to allow civil actions against people alleged to be in a gang. So you talking about civil, you talking about suing people or taking people's property, and it's like, well, what kind of property do children have? You talking about juveniles. So if these juveniles have nothing, so that means you'll be coming after the things that their parents own, trying to take their property from them. District attorneys across Georgia have stated they find the bill to be problematic. DeKalb District Attorney Sherry Boston was quoted in the Atlanta Journal saying, "I do not think this bill is necessary. I'm very concerned about moving juveniles out of the juvenile system and into the adult criminal system. The resources and the things that we're doing in the juvenile system are dedicated to the rehabilitation and turnaround of the youth. The adult system just isn't geared for that." Activists in Georgia are encouraging residents to learn about House Bill 883, which is sponsored by Representative Carl Guilford, and that bill would create a task force to work within schools, community organizations, and social service agencies to develop initiatives to sway teens and young adults away from gangs. So that Bill 883 seems pretty good on the surface, but that whole task force to work with the schools, that part right there, I don't know about that task force and how far they would be able to reach, because it's bad enough that we have overzealous school cops, just like you had like last week. It was 2 weeks ago. It was a 6-year-old girl that got arrested for having a temper tantrum at school. A little girl that suffered from sleep disorder and was, just basically cranky because she didn't have any sleep. Taken to jail, arrested, fingerprinted, booked, and later on the district attorney dropped the charges against her. But it's like this, stuff like this, man. You get shots like you're industrializing and getting the kids, youth ready for that pipeline to prison. And so here's another story in a different location of the country, Seattle, Washington. Members of a group called Black Excellence in Cannabis have filed a federal lawsuit earlier this month against Washington State Governor Inslee and Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board for what they see as state officials running a corrupt and discriminatory licensing and regulatory scheme in the guise of a legal recreational cannabis industry. U.S. Attorney William Barr is also included as a defendant, as the federal government has been acting as an accessory by funding Washington State to enforce federal laws while regulators operate and profit from an illicit licensing and taxation racket at the expense of African Americans' constitutional rights. Constitutionally protected civil rights at the center of this are Title 42 U.S. Code 1981, 1983, and 1985. Plaintiffs Barfield and Manning are turning to the U.S. federal courts for justice after years of working for inclusion for African Americans in the state's lucrative recreational cannabis market. They have pled their case in administrative proceedings, meetings with the executive director and board members, also in meetings with multiple officials and state regulators at public hearings, and finally granted an audience to plead their case to the Governor Inslee, all to no avail. We have in Washington is a system where wealthy white men have performed a hostile takeover of our state's entire cannabis market. Minorities and medical cannabis activists who are on the front lines that fought for the rights for cannabis legalization are almost entirely excluded from the legal market. Washington has a strong and diverse cannabis community. Participation in the economic opportunities generated by the regulation and sale of cannabis should be inclusive and reflective of that community, said Barfield, who also acts as the current director of Black Excellence in Cannabis. Blacks were arrested at 4 times the rate of whites for cannabis violations, yet only own and operate only less than 1% of Washington's licensed cannabis businesses. Many may be inclined to believe that the plaintiffs are just disgruntled, failed applicants who were unable to transform from the unregulated world of medical cannabis providers to the regulated for-profit seed-to-sale traceability system and meet their compliance requirements. For more details about Black Excellence in Cannabis, you can go to blackexcellenceincannabis.com, and that's in Washington, in the state of Washington. And it's, one of those situations, man, where, like you said, you got, 4 times the amount of arrests for marijuana in the state, but less than 1% of the cannabis legalized cannabis dispensaries are owned by minorities. So less than 1%, man. That's, oh boy, here we go. KP's Video News. Peace.